All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if everyone could start finding a seat, that'd be awesome. Good morning, good morning. Thank you guys for being out here today. I am Jeff Wills. If you don't know me, I'm your current BRR president for 2021. Yeah. It's a pleasure to be here with you guys today. So this is our third summit this week. We started out this week clear out in Mountain Home in Elmore County. It was great to be among them. And then on Wednesday, we were in Jim County out in Emmett. Equally great summit there. And we're rounding out the week here in Ada County with our beloved people here in the Boise area. So a quick shout out to our staff. They have done an incredible job. It's for sure a very busy week for them. So a quick round of applause for our staff for everything they've done with our summits. This is our 6th annual Ada County Housing Summit, and I want to take a second to say thank you to our breakfast sponsor, CBH Homes, over there in the corner. Wave to them. You can't miss those colors. They're kind of always there. We appreciate you guys so much. Also, a big thank you to our annual sponsors. We appreciate all the contributions. Without our annual sponsorships and that you see on the screen, we wouldn't be able to facilitate and bring you the type of training and connectivity that we're able to do. So thank you guys so much for that. The purpose of the annual event is to look at trends in our local housing market and to share information about all things in regards to public advocacy and public policy in regards to BRR, IR, and also NAR. For those who are unfamiliar with what the Realtors are doing on your behalf as far as advocacy work, there was an actual public policy review document that was handed out to you on the way in. I would encourage you to take a look at that. Also, if you're ever wondering what is going on at the political or advocacy level, we have Cameron Kinzer, who is the BRR's Director of Government Affairs. Where's Cameron at? He's in the back there. You cannot miss him. He is an amazing resource, and we ask you to always reach out to him if you ever have any questions about that. And because so much of our local housing market and public policy is impacted by what's happening around the country, we'll be kicking off today talking about Austin, Texas. Yeah, we're having a housing summit in Boise talking about Austin, but it'll make sense. I promise you it'll make sense. After that, we will hear about the latest economic development efforts that aim to bring new companies and jobs to Treasure Valley, wrapping up with our annual mid-year market report by Breanna, which is always a much anticipated report from her, mostly because her stats are amazing and that's her jam. We all know that. So let's get everything kicked off. We often hear about why can't we look at what other cities have done to address the growth in the Boise metro area. So when Margaret Carmel, senior reporter of BoiseDev, published an article comparing Boise to Austin, we knew that was probably going to be an opportunity to bring her in and talk to her about that. Margaret, thank you for being here today, and can you go ahead and join us on stage? Give her a round of applause. But we all know we can write about Austin, Texas. I mean, and she did a phenomenal job in her piece, but we actually probably should bring a Texan in to talk about Texas and about Austin. So please welcome Emily Chenevert. Perfect. She is the Chief Executive Officer of the Austin Board of Realtors. Emily has been with ABOR for 9 years, having served as the Director of Government Affairs for a third time, as well as many other areas, I'm sure, within that association. Thank you guys for both being here. I'm going to come join you on sitting down so I don't talk to you from behind. Okay, so I'm going to kind of jump into here. The great thing about our board, our staff, is they give me great notes.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to make sure I'm
We like you guys well trained.
Yes, absolutely. So the Austin board is a bit larger than BRR with 14,000 members, it looks like, in 18 counties, making it the 12th largest association in the country. BRR has just over 6,000 members, ranking us at the 56th spot. So far this year, our members have sold nearly 6,500 homes versus your members have sold 6,500 homes, where ours is about 1,700 so far in the Boise area. The median sales price is also up over 30% in your market as well as ours. So both Austin and Boise are fast-growing cities, obviously. And I found it interesting, if anyone's been to Austin, what I find it very similar. It's just the makeup of it. You have your city, your river that runs right through it, just like ours does. You have your kind of your green belts along it for jogging and walking. But then we walk up Capitol Boulevard right into our Capitol Dome that looks just like yours, and your guys is on Congress. So it's like the cities are almost mirrors of each other. So I've always kind of thought that just from visiting, but then kind of diving into where our city is headed and where Austin currently is, it was interesting, especially after your article, kind of to bring all three of those together. So again, thank you guys for being here. So again, as Margaret included in her article, both are governed by similar state laws and legislative philosophies, and both are engaged in similar conversations about future design of the respective cities, especially around public transit, zoning, and land use codes, and economic development. These are the topics and conversations we most likely will be focusing on mostly today. So first off, public transit. So Margaret cited a professor at the University of Texas.
Welcome.
Okay. I figured as much. You never know,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And she said that the weak public transit system in Austin hobbled the city's growth, as traffic congestion eats up most of the time of people going to and from work. That said, in November of 2020, after quite a few failed attempts, a $7.1 billion bond measure to build a light rail system and expand buses passed, and through the property taxes at the higher rate to pay for the project. So my question for you, Emily, just to kind of start out our discussion here, did AirBor support or oppose this, and why? And what are the expectations for that light rail system to ease the traffic congestion that you guys are currently dealing with? Because we have very similar congestion, and a lot of times, correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll have conversations around transit, and a lot of times I think the verbiage that stops it, someone will say, well, it's not as bad as LA. Well, yeah, right, it's not as bad as LA, but how about we not get there?
Yeah, we weren't that bad at one point either.
Right.
But then we found ourselves as the third worst congestion in the country from a traffic perspective. And I will disagree with the UT professor respectfully as a co-Longhorn and suggest that it didn't hobble our growth. It's just made it really painful to live there, is the reality. And I think it had the potential to stand to threaten what the quality of life in Austin and across Central Texas is the bigger thing. And the question you have to ask is, do I make the investment now, anticipating that the growth that we're experiencing today in Boise is going to continue, or do I wait for it to get really painful and then try to figure out how to solve those problems? I will say, though, that the Austin Board of Realtors did not actually take a formal position on the transit project last November for two reasons. No, the first is we were looking at a 10-penny increase in property taxes in a state where property taxes are the primary source of revenue. So your property taxes are already a really important consideration as you're considering home ownership in Texas. And we were looking at that at the point of a pandemic that we weren't sure we were going to see our way through to where we are today. And so we felt like the timing was poor, although we understood and continue to understand the importance of making that investment in the way that we have as a city. So I'm glad and challenged at the fact that this transit project's going to continue. I do think that it will help lay a foundation for us to improve our current congestion problem. Austin's quite sprawly. It's gotten worse and worse through the years as the growth has continued. That's being exacerbated now by buyers looking to find a price point that they can afford farther and farther out of the city. And so transit and addressing transportation from a comprehensive growth perspective is going to be key to our continued success as a community.
So it sounds like initially that wasn't the case in regards to the support.
Yeah, I mean, ABOR has always taken the perspective that transportation and a commitment to infrastructure at large, housing infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, adequate access to healthcare, all of the things that make a community go round are things that we take interest in to the extent that they serve our homeowners, right? And so we were willing to make that investment and really began our conversation around transit and trains specifically in a manner of wanting to support it. The timing, the extent of the project that they were building was much larger than we had expected, but the timing especially, 10 pennies on property tax when median home prices were rising as rapidly as they were, felt like a lot. We value the investment in transportation, though, and it's going to be an important one for us long term.
So now that that's passed, is that actually, where is that at in regards to that light rail project?
Yeah, so it feels like a million years away. And it's certainly, nothing's fast in transportation, especially when the feds are matching 40% of every dollar you're spending potentially, which should come true as we've seen changes in the federal transportation department. But it's, it will happen. It feels like it's happening at a snail's pace, realistically.
Sure.
One of the things, though, that we're doing really right with that transportation project, which is something that you might consider, is looking at the opportunity to build housing in connection to those transit-oriented development spots. So finding opportunity for both on-site subsidized affordable housing for blue-collar workers who are making our city go round, but also being really intentional about building housing development at market rate also at every component of that rail system is something that we're really glad that they put some dollars towards and that the city has recognized is important in the project.
So BRR is in favor of local option tax, and it sounds like there's something similar that was able to get that through for you guys.
Yeah.
Often used, if you're not familiar with that, it's often used to raise funds for specific local projects such as involving areas, streets and roads and refurbishing communities' downtown areas. Margaret noted in her article, while the bonds on property taxes are allowed in Idaho, they cannot be used for public transit. And currently, Idaho only allows resort towns with populations of less than 10,000 people to ask their residents if they want to impose local sales tax. One alternative was a vehicle registration tax increase that BRR supported in 2018, you may remember that, as a source of infrastructure, but unfortunately that failed. So with Margaret, even if Idaho did allow more localities to vote for a local option tax or bond on property taxes for public transit, do you think it would pass given the anti-tax sentiment of our many residents? And I'm assuming that's probably similar in Texas as well.
I think it depends on the scope of that, of what you mean by who would be voting on it. I think that if you pose that question to the city of Boise right now, there would be a really strong indication that people would support it. Because I'm hearing a lot of people out getting frustrated with the lack of bus service. That's something I hear a lot. I would ride the bus more if I didn't have to worry about getting the last bus home at 6:45, from downtown. And so I'm hearing that growing more and more, even from people who live in the western edge of Boise that is a little bit more suburban car-oriented. But I think if we expanded the scope to build a light rail or to build a regional project, I don't think people in Star would want to do that. I don't think at this point, I don't sense as much urgency on that from people in Canyon County. I've talked to people who live out in the western part of the valley saying, I live out in Canyon County because I want to drive my car. And that's okay. That's not a judgment one way or the other. That's just, that's life. Something I think everyone in Idaho has heard over and over is Idahoans like their cars. And so there's a lot of I don't even necessarily think it's the anti-tax sentiment that just powers that. I think it's the feeling of people just they would prefer to drive. And I don't know if we've gotten to that pain point yet where they got to in Austin, where people are saying, people who would prefer to drive themselves haven't gotten to the point where they've realized that this will help the overall connectivity of the region. And that nexuses with something I also hear when I talk to people about affordable housing is they say, well, if you can't afford to live in Boise, don't live here. Live where you can afford. And if the only place someone can afford is in Wilder, and there's no way for them to get a light rail or get a bus or get something into Boise to work or to Meridian to work, then that starts presenting its own just domino effect of challenges for that individual and the economy at large.
So I've always kind of felt the thing I like about Boise a lot is that obviously we're in a red state overall, but I would say that Boise's pretty purple overall in regards to like who we have in our valley. In regards to getting support outside of the Treasure Valley, obviously it gets a lot more red as you do that. What are your feelings in regards to getting like buy-in from places who are starting to have growth as well, like Coeur d'Alene, Pocatello, Idaho Falls, in regards to the growth in those areas?
In regards to, are you talking about local option tax?
I'm just talking about like in regards to getting enough votes, if that would be something that we'd actually get people outside the Treasure Valley to jump on board as well?
I just want to make sure I understood your question.
Yeah. No, you're good.
I think that's a tougher ask because those communities are still, the people that live in those communities, and especially the legislators that represent them, the attitude that I hear from them a lot, and I don't mean attitude in a negative way, but just their philosophy of thinking is, well, I live in Pocatello because I don't want to deal with traffic. Well, I live in, outside of Coeur d'Alene because I want to look at the beautiful lake and not deal with sort of these urban problems that the Treasure Valley is confronting. If you spent any time in the Idaho legislature, you know that the number one topic of discussion is property taxes. The number two topic of discussion is how they want to go home because they don't like it here. And so I think that attitude is, he knows I'm not wrong. The attitude there is, well, that's an urban problem, that's a Boise problem. The rest of us in Idaho don't have that problem. And so I'm not necessarily sure what's going to happen to get to a point where people who don't live here are willing to make those sort of policy changes.
But isn't the play not to focus specifically on transportation or Boise problems? It's to say that local control matters and that you ought to have the ability at a local level to make the investments that you want to make in your community, regardless of what the state thinks about it. I mean, from a political standpoint at large, we've been having lots of conversation about who gets to make what decisions, right? Who gets to tell me how I get to do what I want to do in my community? And who better than at a local level for you to decide how you want to manage your future and manage today? Whether you're rural or urban, it really doesn't matter, and the play doesn't matter. Right now, you're being hamstringed, it sounds like, by your legislature in terms of what you can decide to do in your community. That sounds inconsistent with the values that you hold.
I think that idiosyncrasy is something people talk about a lot, and it's been discussed even more in the past year as the legislature has moved further right. There has been less emphasis on local control, or the things that people have focused on with local control have been items that people on the right side of the political spectrum favor more than people on the left. And I think there's a lot of people on the left that, or not even on the left, just in the business community, that are getting frustrated and saying, why would you say you're pro-local control when you're not even letting us give the option, for Texas? No one's more mad about this than Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue, who's been trying to build a jail for many, many years, right, and can't get a bond and can't get local option taxing authority to attempt to even pay for it that way. And so you're absolutely right. It is in some way, it is contrary to some of those values, and that is something that people in Idaho are kind of shaking their fists at the sky about right now, is why can't we come up with a conservative solution to these problems?
I have one follow-up question in regards to what you experienced in Austin, because you're talking about how people don't want to give up their cars, and I get that. I was born and raised in Kuna. I like to drive. Was that something similar you guys saw in Austin? What was the turning point where the pain point became big enough for people that, okay, screw my car, I don't care anymore, I just need another better option to get from, you mentioned coming in from Wilder, right? Was there something that turned the corner for that, where everyone was like, okay, now we're on board? Because there is a freedom aspect to driving, and we all love that, but there's also just futuristic, how are we going to facilitate this as housing, gets farther and farther out as far as affordability? Was there something in your growth pattern or something that that happened and then, okay, now everyone was on board?
Yeah, well, let me be clear. Nobody loves a truck more than a Texan. And I drive my car every single day. And live in the suburbs, so I contributed to sprawl. But, we tried two other attempts at ballot measures to support transit and couldn't get them through in Austin because people weren't committed to it. They liked their cars, and they didn't think that the pain point was that bad. What changed was the pain point. It's as we have continued to grow, as our congestion has continued to increase, and my ability to get where I need to go within a reasonable amount of time has impacted my quality of life. people have started to realize that that investment is a necessary one. I would say the other thing is that certainly the emergence of tech in Austin has changed the nature of the folks that live there, especially in Central Austin. And, we're struggling with that culturally. Who we were, who we want to be, and who's here now are all different things. And so I do think that there is a younger population in some degrees. There's actually, in Texas, we're one of the largest what they call gray-haired communities, where folks are coming to retire and be happy downtown, and they're glad to not have a yard, and they like the flexibility of transit as an option for them. So we've had a lot of different people dynamics, too, that I do think allowed for this to get through the finish line this year.
Cool. Well, we're going to transfer that, right, and transition into our zoning now. So it kind of leads perfectly into that. So the need for expanded public transit, which we've been talking about, and road improvements is the result of the growth in the nearby communities, as well as land use codes and resident settlement limiting the amount of type of new construction that can be built near the city center. You are likely aware that the city of Boise is reviewing their zoning code right now. BR's Public Policy Committee has provided feedback, and there will be additional opportunities to comment in August and in November, with a draft available for review in March of 2022. Austin has been working to rewrite its zoning and land use codes since 2012 through a process dubbed Code Next. The latest version of Austin's plan is focused on rezoning, which refers to increasing density through taller buildings. A local example of rezoning in the forthcoming is the ICCU building in downtown Boise, which will be located on 4th and Idaho and will include residential units, retail space, and parking. These types of projects are usually proposed along streets best suited for public transit. And Austin is looking to create 135,000 more homes over the next 10 years through their changes in their zoning. However, residents have cited concerns for road congestion, obviously, and loss of neighborhood character, which we all know about the character that people love in Boise as well, which has stalled the Code Next in the courts. So Emily, obviously being the Austin talking point, which again, you've been awesome. Prior to the process being stalled, how did ABOR's Public Policy Committee provide input on the zoning rewrite?
There is no more painful a process than looking at your zoning when you're in the kind of rapid growth that you guys are in and that we have been in for a long time. So let me first just say, I feel your pain, and if I twitch, it's because this 10-year process has been brutal for us as a community. And it's because of that dynamic between accepting the growth that has occurred and the growth that's going to continue, and maintaining what we want to be as a community, right? There's a real thing about maintaining character in especially infill communities that have been there for so long, that make Austin what it is and make Boise what it is today. But where else is the housing going to go? How else do we manage the 140 people we net a day that are coming to Austin, Texas, and however many are coming to Boise a day? You can put your head in the sand, but they're going to keep coming, is my expectation, because that's certainly what happened to us. So I would say first and foremost, just understand that it is a painful process because it requires the community to wrestle with the things that are most central to who you are as a community. That aside, we've really approached the Land Development Code opportunity as an opportunity to put more tools in the toolbox. So row homes might not be right for everywhere, but can they be right for somewhere? Because right now they're zoned in point no places in Austin. Could we be open to adaptive reuse of commercial space that's been left empty because of the pandemic? Facebook's got this beautiful building. I think there's 2 people there today because of all that we've been through. And they're probably not planning on making their people go in every day. Is there opportunity to turn some of that sitting commercial space into housing units in a place that's already dense, where I'm not intruding on existing neighborhood communities through infill development? Also, can we agree that people that live in a house are people, and that their families, whether they live in a single family home or a flag lot with 3 properties, or at the end of the day, they are all still buyers, they are all still members of your community, they are all probably still families to some degree to someone. And so we have to be careful about gut checking our resistance to that change because of our perception about who our neighbor might be. And that's really difficult to do. But by the same token, congestion is real. 10 cars parked up and down your infill communities is a real thing and something that you might not want to embrace. Finding opportunity to balance the compatibility standards of your upzoning is something that you can do. I might allow for density, but I'm going to be really sensitive to how high I go next to a traditional single-family community. There's a way to create balance in this. What I would encourage you to do is not what Austin did. Please don't let the death of this project be a resistance to all change everywhere, ever. If you can just start with incrementally adding tools to the toolbox and very carefully, like a surgeon, carving out spots where these tools can be utilized, you might start to see that the change is not as scary as you thought it was. That's what we're having to do now that our land use code battle is literally caught in a court system. We tried for 10 years to change our land use code and our zoning process. And for 10 years, we fought with each other about what Austin's going to be in its future. So now that fight is going to happen in a judge's hands. And what we're left with are very incremental opportunities to create change and create housing in a community that has no houses for the people that live there. And it's a challenge. So I would encourage you perhaps to take it a bite at a time, allow the tools to be in the toolbox, and then be careful about where you put them so that there's sensitivity to everybody wanting to own the characteristics of your community together.
I wish I could say that we weren't already fighting that fight, but I think we
You're
already
fighting
are.
the fight, yeah.
In regards to just the sediment around that, I mean, obviously that 2-block portion of Jefferson, as St. Luke's was expanding, came down to a vote with the Ada County Highway District. We had some logistical fights around even the Costco getting put in Meridian, which was like, I think we're going to need this out here at some point.
Nothing more controversial than a Costco.
Yeah, nothing more controversial.
Really. We had a Walmart debacle very similar years ago. My understanding, too, is that you guys are about to transition the nature of your local governance and turn into single-member districts from all at-large council, which is something that Austin did several years ago as well. That does truly change the dynamic of the conversation that you're having. It allows communities outside of the probably 12 people that are making your decisions today to get to have a louder voice. It's an incredible opportunity for realtors, especially because you represent every corner of the community that you service this association. And so I really, really encourage you guys to get involved as those single-member districts flip. Be engaged with every candidate in every district. One of them's going to win. And use that as an opportunity to kind of diversify the context of the conversation you're having as well.
I think diversity will be important, especially as you try to get some of those pocket communities to get on board, and which brings me to a question for you, Margaret. The term NIMBY and YIMBY, not in my backyard. Yes, in my backyard has obviously been used, but in your article you kind of used a new one, which was QUIMBY, which was fun, which is quality in my backyard. Have you seen this term used yet in Boise, and if so, where at?
So this term came from a conversation that I had with a planning and zoning commissioner in Austin who had some really strong feelings about Code Next. And
they all do.
Yeah, just to put a fine point on it.
Yeah.
And she, in the course of our conversation, came up with this. She's like, I think I'm quality in my backyard. So I think she kind of came up with it on the spot. So I haven't heard that here in Boise, but something that I hear a lot is, because I have sat in more hours of development hearings than anyone ever wants to in their life. And what I hear in those hearings a lot is people come up and they say, I'm not opposed to development. I'm just to this lot developing. I'm just opposed to it developing this way. I would want it to, I'm fine with it developing, I just want something different. And I think that's really interesting because all of the times that people say that, they say, I just want something different. I don't want, it's always, well, I don't want apartments, or I don't want townhomes, or I don't want condos, or, and then you really get into, well, what do you want? And the answer always comes back with, I want a bunch of single-family homes on 2-acre lots. And that really is, to your point,
yeah.
That's really kind of not where we have to go within the city limits. I think that everyone, planners, government people agree, like, we are running out of spaces for people. And that's not to say that, people who live on 2-acre lots that that's a bad thing, or that you don't want, that rural, semi-rural lifestyle. But we're getting to a point where we are a city with urban problems, with urban population, and with people coming here every single day, and we need a place to put them. Because if they, to your point, it's like if they don't live, if we build a bunch of 2-acre lots, then they're going to sprawl. They're going to live in Wilder. They're going to live in Fruitland. They're going to live way out in the edge of Canyon County, and that's going to cause the pain point that we're seeing in Austin. And then here in Idaho, I don't know what the viability is of us getting tools to fix it the way that they are working on doing now. And so I think that I understand the sentiment behind that quality in my backyard, but whenever you really drill down into what does someone mean by quality in my backyard, what that means is I want someone on a 2-acre lot. And I don't know, or I don't necessarily know if that is something that makes sense for us to pursue.
And I guess at the end of the day, who represents that buyer? Like, do you not know best that the person that lived in a duplex is probably just as great a neighbor as the one that wanted a single-family home on a 2-acre lot? You guys have a real opportunity to tell the story of the people that are coming here, that want to be a part of this community, that desire to embrace the current value and structure of Boise. You can be a change agent for that in a way that's a beautiful narrative about the way that your community is growing and the instrumental role that you play in that. So I encourage you guys, you're in such a great spot because you're not where we are today. And I'm like 5 states away, so I can say that without worrying them cratering my market. But the truth is, it's rough, y'all. Our median home price increased by $100,000 in the last 6 months. Let that sit with you for a second. Who's buying that house? Elon Musk might be, but the person that's working at the hotels downtown that's making all of our festivals go round is not living there. And there's not a lot of options for them even outside of Austin. So there is this real and true thing about balancing bringing labor to work in the community that you love, bringing folks to do the jobs that you need done, your teachers, your firefighters. Our teachers can't afford a home in Austin. They can't afford a home in the next county over, let alone our nurses, our firefighters. All of our frontline responders that have literally saved our lives over the last year cannot live in Austin, Texas. So you've got a good chance and a great opportunity at this time to decide that you're going to make space for people and that you're going to be a community and not get caught in that rhetoric of quality. Because I'm not sure who gets to define what quality is. That's in the eye of the beholder.
I think that's a really good point. Before we move on to the next question, is that quality question is just really subjective. And I think that when you see that kind of conversation, then there's always, I notice this a lot in conversations of land use conversations. There's always the stuff that's said and there's the stuff that's not said. And I find that the further you drill down into the things that are not said, I have had people say off the record, they say, hey, can I just, don't put this in the newspaper, but I just don't want insert something offensive or something like a bad comment. Like one woman said to me, and this was printed in the pages of the Idaho Press, I don't want people and their baby daddies in my neighborhood because of an apartment complex. And that sentiment is really out there. And I think that when you start really getting into, well, I only want quality in my neighborhood, I think there's a lot of other things, depending on, and not to cast judgment on the person who quoted in my article. I don't want you to think I'm saying bad things about them, but I hear that sentiment a lot. And whenever you get under well, what does that really mean? There's some things there that aren't really conducive to community.
Agreed, 100%. Well, and the only way to be engaged in that piece is to be engaged. I think so many people want to keep their head in the dirt and be like, oh, someone else is going to take care of this when this is not the case. So which kind of leads me into the next question. Obviously, Mayor Beater and now Mayor McLean have been doing a lot with Compass and their open forums with the community. So Margaret, in regards to those forums and just the momentum that those have made, have you seen the city of Boise be able to move projects forward by showing how they align with the options and input from all of these stakeholders and or listening sessions? And if so, have you seen where they've published updated plans and documents or guidance based on that actual input they got?
I think if you ask people in Boise who are frustrated about the growth, they will tell you no one is listening to them ever, and they're very upset. But as someone who watches a lot of these conversations, I think the city is really trying to work with people. You saw this on the city's recent change of the housing bonus ordinance, which I'm sure your group has been really engaged on. Is they came out with this housing bonus ordinance, which basically just tells developers, like, if you're going to build with affordable housing or on a transit corridor in a way that, you know, the city wants to incentivize, we'll let you build an extra story on your building. We'll give you some more density, and it's sort of that, you know, carrot, right, to build what they want. And what we saw in that process is the city's original proposal got watered down quite a bit after neighbors, you know, put input, because they were worried about the character of their neighborhood. They were saying, I don't want a 5-story building in an R3 zone. You know, I don't want a 4-story building in an R2 zone. And so what the city did was, in that process, they said, okay, we're going to remove R2 zones. You know, we're not going to have these affordable housing bonus trades in R2. We're going to, you know, make things a little bit less intense in R3. And then they also, the other part of that trade was the city was saying, okay, if a developer has a project with less than 50 units, they won't have to go through the public hearing process, which really upset a lot of people who really, they want to be engaged. They want to have their input. And so what the city did was they said, okay, we'll say you can skip public hearing if you're only under 25. And you know, there are people in the city who are still really, really upset about that housing bonus ordinance. I hear about it all the time. People are very worried about that impact it will have on their lives in their neighborhoods. And there's a real fear of a 5-story building plopping down in the middle of their space. But what I saw watching that process was the city make concessions, not, you know, internally, like, hey, we just looked at our feedback, people are really mad, let's crank this down. And then the city council cranked it down again after the public hearing. So, and then, you know, I see this where I've seen the ICCU tower that down at 4th Street in downtown, the city council asked that to be it was redesigned, I think, twice, and then the city council again went in and put some requirements on that, made some design changes. They mandated that a certain amount of those units go to Section 8 voucher holders. And that's something that, so they're making these little trades and making concessions to the neighbors while still sort of moving ahead. And I think that narrative that the city is, maybe they're not listening to the activists in the sense that they're not approving these projects, because they are. Yeah. But they're making these sorts of concessions.
Well, that can be the death of your community too, though, because in Austin that's become weaponized, where the concessions are so stout now that at some point the developer gives up and walks, or it's so watered down that it's not actually what we need at that point in that corridor. The other thing that's happened is I might be zoned SF3 and be able to technically build 3 lots, but the compatibility standards that have been built into that zoning code around trees and impervious cover and all of these other requirements are so ridiculous that I'll never get 3 units on that lot. So they say they're giving me 3, but they're not giving me 3.
Well, in regards to giving and taking, in regards to that, because I think that's half the battle, right? One of your councilmen in Austin had mentioned that a solution would be to have the developers build affordable units in exchange for density bonuses, instead of allowing them to instead choose to pay into an affordable housing fund. In Idaho, mandatory inclusionary zoning or requiring a developer to sell a certain number of units under market rate is illegal. However, incentives to include affordable units as part of a project are allowed, and something that BR would be in support of. That same Austin City Councilman did support building affordable housing on city-owned land for that city's new zoning code, which is something that the city of Boise is doing with land trust, and another tactic that BR is in support of. So what were ABOR's positions on development incentives of government land trusts, and how did the Public Policy Committee provide guidance on that?
Yeah, so inclusionary zoning is also illegal in Texas, but the city does have quid pro quo exchanges where they can demand on-site affordability in exchange for more density, or in exchange for an expedient zoning or planning process at the city, whatever it might be. On-site affordability is always better than fee in lieu, because if I pay fee in lieu to a pot and I put $1 million over here, where are you going to build it in Austin, Texas? There's just not a lot of places left to build those units. So I might have the money sitting there for affordable housing, but nowhere to put it, which does not help me very much in terms of trying to move that ball forward on true affordable housing. So on-site affordability is always better if your growth becomes so rapid that you don't have a whole lot left. We have worked hard. We do support the ability to leverage land trusts, to leverage independent taxing entities that allow for reinvestment in the community. We've seen a lot of success with that, especially with a former airport in Austin. The Mueller site has been turned into a huge master plan community development with lots of on-site affordability and lots of market rate affordability right now. It's one of our best developments in Austin. We've seen a lot of success with it. So I guess what I would say at large is just think creatively, again, about the tools that can be in the toolbox. Let's just try a few things on a couple of parcels before we go apply it at large across the city. And perhaps that allows for the rub between I don't want to grow, but we're growing to soften a bit.
So we have 2 minutes left.
Oof.
We have a lot to talk about still. We're going to try to bring up housing affordability right here at the very end.
Okay.
Clark Krause is going to be up in a little bit from BVEP talking about everything they're doing to bring in more employment into the valley. But it looks like in my notes here that you guys launched a campaign to encourage sellers to talk to realtors about actually listing in Austin as a way to alleviate and bring inventory back. Can you talk a little bit about those efforts and how they've received that as members and also the consumers?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the responsibility I feel as the CEO of the association is to help you, my members, engage in conversations with their buyers and sellers about how to navigate the chaos that is today's market. And so we do try to help provide conversation guides, context for, hey, you're going to list, it's going to be a little wild and woolly, could you take a vacation because it's going to sell in a day? But here's how that's going to happen, and here's how you can consider evaluating these offers. Just not trying to play the role of the broker in terms of managing the contracts and the offers, but encouraging a consistent narrative around what our market is. And also encouraging buyers. It's going to be tough. We're going to get you a house. You're going to have to try a few times. Just really trying to ensure that the narrative around our market is one that's consistent, so that we're not cropping up with lots of negativity around what is probably one of the hottest markets in the country.
And then Margaret, for you looked into the impact investors have on real estate market, both locally and nationally. And our Vice President, or President-elect Becky Enrico Kramer actually commented on that article piece as well. What you found is that while investors are present in our market, they are not the majority. And while cash sales have been on the rise, obviously probably the same in Austin, they're not just coming from out of state, but also from Idahoans who have been able to use their equity as well. Would you like to share any insights from your article, which we'll have links to as well, with us while we're here?
That's a really complex topic because there's a lot of fear out there right now where people say everyone's only buying in cash. It's all cash offers. It's all Californians. It's all, bazillionaire tech people buying up all these houses. But then when you look at the actual data, no, we're still under a quarter of sales are cash sales. We are still seeing, flipping is on the rise. There was some data that I found that, said that we've had a 30% increase in flip transactions, in a recent span of time. But that number is still, that percentage of flipped houses is still half of what it was in 2006, before the Great Recession. So we have that fear, but it's not the end of the world the way we hear about it, sometimes on Facebook. But with that being said, I think it's really important to not minimize the impact that we're seeing from investors in this community. There was a Washington Post article published this week that featured a couple looking at homes in Star who owned 9 here. And with the internet, hedge funds are buying homes. They can put an offer on a home in 1 millisecond. It goes up on Zillow. They have an offer, and that sort of, and there's no way that someone and that the amount of investors purchasing homes nationwide is higher for homes in that affordability range. in that lower price range. And so it's really important to say, yes, let's not let the boogeyman of cash offers dominate the conversation and scare the hell out of everybody. But we also can't minimize that, say that this market with these investors and these hedge funds buying homes is the same as it has been, as it was even 5 years ago, because that has a real impact on, 26-year-olds like me who would love to buy a house.
And obviously it's going to sound super biased in saying this, but because of that, I don't think there's ever been a better time to need the help of a local realtor in regards to sitting down expectations and guidance, coming out the gate.
Correct.
To try to willy-nilly it halfway through with that level of competition is nearly impossible, and I'm preaching to the choir here. You came so far, so I want to leave the last words with you.
Oh, man.
You have some of the best realtors, I believe, in the country. I mean, not just in the state, but in the country, in this room right now. What recommendations would you have for them as we continue forward, trailblazing of something that's not really trailblazing because you've kind of done it before us?
We're doing it well in some ways and not in others. But I am so excited for you guys, actually. It's great to see that dysfunction lives in other places. So, hey, we've got that going for us. But you guys are in such a great spot to just get engaged and be at the table today so that you are writing that future for tomorrow. You are pillars of this community that make it what it is. And you can tell the narrative you want to tell about your community, or you can let a few fussy people tell it for you. So I think you guys just really stay engaged. Do share your value. Nobody does it better than a realtor, but you're sort of like Mary Poppins. You pull it out of the bag and put it back in, and you don't talk about how hard it is sometimes. Share your worth, because you are working very hard. You're working probably harder than you ever have today. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your investment in your community, and just tell more people about it. Tell the story you want to tell. And thank you for having me today.
So we're wrapping up. Margaret, I want to say thank you guys so much for what you do at BVEP,
Not me.
oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking.
BoiseDev.
BoiseDev, all the acronyms. No, but seriously, anytime there's stuff happening in our valley, I know, and I feel hopefully you guys feel the same way when we read that information. It's always really good information, and it's a huge part of what we're doing moving forward. So thank you so much. And then also, thank you again for taking the time to be here. I did want to share with you, too, as you go back and you're having conversation with Texas realtors, specifically Austin realtors, let them know that you came to Boise and that the one time we played the Sooners, we beat them.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying.
What?
No, the Sooners. We beat the Sooners.
Oh, you can beat the OU.
That's what I'm saying. We beat the Sooners.
Okay, I'm down for that.
Anytime we have opportunity, we're friends.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
We're off to, yeah. Not
You
Texas.
said Sooners, and I had a reaction.
No, yeah. But thank you guys.
Thank
I appreciate
you guys.
it so much.
Thank you.
Margaret, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm almost gotten myself in a bad spot there. I think. No, I'm saying, we took care of business. Let Austin know. All right, now gotta get back to my notes here, you guys. Give me 1 second. Again, just appreciate you guys for both taking the time to be here. How long are you in Austin, or in Boise from Austin? You leave today? Safe travels back to Austin. Absolutely. We're super excited. We announced this on First and Monday when we were in Mountain Home about our Housing Authority Initiative announcement that we have. So we're super excited about this. If you don't know, buckle down. We're excited about it. Essentially, we've created a new affordable housing initiative alongside LEAP Charities, which is a local nonprofit created by the realtor himself, Bart Cochran, focused on developing safe, beautifully designed housing that is affordable to purchase or to rent. To help fund this new housing each year, at least for the next 5 years, BRR will invest $50,000 into the LEAP Housing Trust to remove the cost of the land from the final purchase price of the property, making home affordability and ownership more possible for more people. This will be done through a grant from BRRs and also with support from IMLS, as well as proceeds that come from the Circle of Excellence each and every year, which many of you typically always attend, which thank you guys for always doing that as well. To share more details about this partnership, again, we're very lucky to have Lori Benfiet with us. She is the Housing Director of LEAP, and Lori, the stage is all yours.
One, it's a little intimidating in this setting. And also, I am very new to LEAP. I've been there about 3 months. I've been in development for over 20 years. And the reason I went with LEAP was because of the way they look at affordable housing. They look outside the box. They don't try to do the standard box, and if the funding isn't there, we just don't do it. LEAP isn't that way. We look for alternatives and ways to do it, and this grant is extremely helpful in helping us think outside the box and complete that. And the committee up here, or the panel up here, it so hits home to what we deal with on a daily basis. The biggest thing with NIMBY, not in my backyard, is that most people say, well, we don't want those people living here. They don't understand that the people that are living there are the ones helping them at McDonald's, are doing the hotels, are doing the restaurants, are basically our service providers that are going to be living in their backyard, basically. So it's important for us to explain that to people. Excuse me, smoke's getting to me. So the projects we got going, it just happened to work out perfectly with the areas that the grant was awarded in. Of course, in Ada County, we're doing a program that is very unique. It's a half house program. It is in combination with a church that had excess land that was just sitting there behind their church, and they decided to lease that property to us for 99 years, which again took the land out of the cost. We're able to build 2 houses and rent those to people who are living at 30% of the area median income, which for a family of 4 is about $26,000. So in our market right now, they're not going to find anywhere to live rent-wise, home ownership. So this is truly an affordable property. That's where a portion of the funds will go. That will help this make this even more affordable for those homeowners, or excuse me, renters. The next project we were looking at was in Elmore County. This is a little bit bigger project. We're looking at over 8 acres, and we're developing 124 units of multifamily and home ownership. And again, we're using the land trust, so we took the land out of it. On the home ownership, we're doing self-help, so they're committing sweat equity. So again, it takes that value down where we can serve people at 80 to 40% of area median income. So it's truly hitting people who right now can't find housing. And the final one was Emmett. We have a site that we're looking at. It is downtown Emmett, and we're looking at designing about 16 units there, and again, that will serve from 30 to 80% of area median income as renters. Part of the project with the Elmore County and Falcons Landing is we've bumped that up so we have some market rate units too. So we're trying to get a mix where it's a true community, where you're serving everyone that needs housing, because the part that usually gets left out is middle class. That 80% to 140% of the area median income, there's no down payment programs for them. There's no loan assistance. There's nothing that fits that group. So we're trying to bring them into ours as well and help them to continue to have housing. As far as the TAF project, it is very unique. It's the first of its kind. As I said, the land will be leased to LEAP. We will have a lease for 99 years that's automatically renewable. I don't plan on being around when that comes due, but just in case, it will continue. But the 2 houses will sit on the back part of their lot, so the access will be through the side of the parking lot for the church. So the church is kind of taking ownership to them. That's going to be part of what they do. And that was important to them as far as design. Everything that's going to be put on that lot is important. It's going to reflect who they are. So understanding some of those ideas that were mentioned up here as far as people want it to look nice. Most people, when they think of affordable housing, they think of the boxes that were built years ago, where you can go through any town and say, oh, that must be a housing authority property because they all look exactly the same. A box, a couple windows, and a flat roof. We don't do that. Our design is with the community. So whatever is in that neighborhood, we design. And Emmett is a perfect example, and Taft's a perfect example. We're designing to the neighborhood. We're wanting to fit in. We want people not to know it's affordable housing, that it's just housing. And then finally, we have a ton of partners that we work with. This is only a few of them. LEAP is unique, and Bart Cochran, who started this organization, is even more unique as far as getting out there in the community and educating people about affordable housing and where those gaps are and where they can help, whether it's coming and volunteering whether it's donating funds as is done today. So it's important to understand all of this with the partners, with the funding sources, with everything that goes on in this. Excuse me. So to get involved, I've gone through this rather quickly, and I know that you have a lot more that you have to go through this morning, so I don't want to take up too much time, but advocacy is huge, as you heard on the panel. Going to these city council meetings, going to the neighborhood meetings, supporting the affordable housing piece of it, with the knowledge that you have of the market and your area that you're serving, you are an outstanding advocate for our programs. So please be aware of those, and if you're able to do that, that certainly helps us, and we can give you any information that you need along the affordable housing avenue. Volunteer, of course. All nonprofits ask for volunteers. That's what we do, ask for money and volunteers. But truly, volunteering with some of our projects, sometimes we have landscape projects. We've had a painting project going on right now with one of our projects. There's always something that you could help with, even if it's just education. You know, helping some of our people that are looking at being first-time home buyers, understanding what the market is, how that housing market works. So there's a lot of stuff that you guys can help us with. Identifying land opportunities. As you heard, most of the time the land is what kicks us out of it. That's what makes it too expensive, and you guys have seen that. You've seen what land is going for. You can't develop the land right now and make it affordable. So if you know someone who is interested in maintaining affordable units, they're willing to donate, they're willing to lease, whatever the case may be, give us a call. Even if you don't think it would work, call us. We never say no to anything. There's always a way to make something work. And finally, a give back, you know, donating. If you're looking at possibly a portion of what your sales are, your commission, anything along that line, if your office wants to put together a pot of money that goes towards that, goes to the land trust, make sure it keeps something affordable. We'll always take money. That's not a hard thing to do, but we truly appreciate the support any way that you can give it to us. And finally, if you need, this is our basic contact information. Just give us a call, email us. Any questions, if you know of a building that is just sitting there, like was mentioned, there's a lot of vacant buildings that aren't being used now because so many people are able to work from home. Let us know. There's ways to develop those units, and there's ways to do mixes and make marketable units. There's funding to do businesses and housing and all that together. There's a lot of stuff that we're familiar with that you may not know of, so throw those buildings our way. We may have to say no after research, but we'll never say no to anything until we've gone through it and made sure we've evaluated everything and looked at every source that's possible. So I don't know if you have any questions. I know I went through that rather quickly, but okay. Thanks. Oh. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. Well, thank you, Lori, so much. Appreciate you again for being here, and we're just super excited to be, contributing to such a collective movement within our community. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you again for taking the time to be here today. We're gonna take a 10-minute break, let you guys stretch your legs, chat a little bit, get some more refreshments that CBH so graciously provided us today, and we're back in 10. Cool? Awesome. Thank you, guys. So I have to apologize to Alliance Title. I was reading and paraphrasing my notes, and CBH just like took full credit for it. Like, yeah, we're breakfast sponsor too. They are our summit sponsor, but Alliance Title was our actual breakfast sponsor. So my apologies to Alliance Title. Thank you so much. But I like how CBH just rolled with it. They're like, yes. Now, we love you both, and thank you guys. Without you guys, this definitely couldn't have taken place today, so thank you so much. So welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed the little interaction and just engaging with each other again. How nice is that, right? Like, I love it. Absolutely love it. Next up, we're pleased to have with us Krause, the Executive Director for the Boise Valley Economic Partnership, also known as BVEP. For those who are unfamiliar with the organization, BVEP offers site location assistance to businesses interested in relocating, starting up, and expanding to the Treasure Valley. In the last 9 years, BVEP has helped bring more than 40 companies and over 10,000 jobs to the Boise Metro. As we've already touched on, a strong job market with good wages is one of the keys to having thriving community, but also addressing housing affordability issues, which is why the Boise Regional Realtors many real estate brokerages are members of BVEP. We're thankful that Clark could be here today with us, and having said that, I'll give him the floor. Thanks so much.
I remember getting here in 2010 in September, and one of the first things I did was a Realtors Association. It may have been Breanna, it may have been this association, I'm not sure, but it was done at about 10 in the morning, and it was just completely black outside, and in the room it was black, and everybody was crying, and there was lots of tissue, and it's a whole different market today, isn't it? I got in the night before. I was staying off of Eagle and Overland at the courtyard, and I literally came in on a Friday night, and I, checked in with the receptionist, and she said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Oh, I just got a job here." And she said, "Oh, that's awesome. Do you want to buy a house from me?" And That's not this is not a comedy routine. I promise you, this really happened. And the next day I got up, and if you remember Overland, there had been all this beautiful development out there, and it was all empty. There was nobody out there. And so I thought, I do economic development. I just moved here, and this is my experience in the last 12 hours. And then I went to Starbucks, and a guy tried to sell me a Harley. And then I went up to the barista, and she wanted to sell me a house. This is all true story. And then I sat down with this guy that had the Harley. I didn't buy the Harley, by the way. And he also tried to sell me his Snap-on franchise, that like the Rolex of tools. And I realized this place was devastated. And boy, it's changed a little bit, huh? I mean, it's crazy. And I know you live in this world every day, so you were there for all of it. But I think it's important that we remember that, we fix the roof when the sky is shining, when the sun is shining. And so it's really important for us in economic development, even though everybody is kind of, hey, there's too much prosperity here and there's too much growth. This is when we get things done for those times when things aren't as great as they used to be. So let's remember that as we're out there. I know that all of you would like a little more housing inventory, but we don't want to have too much housing inventory. So national marketing of Boise Metro, this is what we do. We're community resource. So this is something we've taken on recently. We do have a research side. And so like Breanna's organization, we are here to, if you have questions, those types of things, we have a lot of information on our website. We keep that up pretty well. And if you need other things, sometimes we have them in our office, and we'll let you know if we do or we don't. But if you're not on our Facebook, we do post a lot of accolades and stuff, so I hope all of you follow us. Custom data analysis. So we are really here to do the sales and marketing to bring new companies with good jobs and investment into the valley. And those jobs are for people who already live here, and maybe some of them that are moving in. But the jobs that we're creating, So if we create 100 jobs through an expansion or relocation of a company that's coming in here, first of all, we want those jobs above county wage. And the second of all, we want to know what it looks like from their hiring process. You would think that if I was creating 100 jobs here and I was back in, let's say, Wisconsin, bringing a manufacturing plant, that I'd be bringing a whole bunch of people over. The reality is that if I'm creating 100 jobs here in an expansion or relocation, I'm expecting to find those jobs locally. So we're really creating opportunities for people who live here. I have to explain that now because either that or I get yelled at about all the growth with my neighbor, or in the Albertsons, I get accosted. So it's important to know. Why do we want to do this? I talked a little bit about this. You want to ensure prosperity in good and bad times, create jobs for those who live here, and broaden our industry base. If you look around the valley, we have 4 or 5 major companies that really are the supplier of a lot of our higher wage jobs. So it's really important that we create more rooftops with more opportunities so that, number one, we can find a job, our neighbors can find our job, and when our kids graduate from Boise State, let's not lose that talent. So those are the reasons we do what we do. Really interesting what happened to us during the pandemic. So about half of our projects, so these are vetted companies that are looking into the Boise Valley to possibly move here. Before the pandemic hit, about half of our leads, half of our projects that we worked, companies coming in here, were office, mostly out of Seattle or Bay Area. Completely dries up during the pandemic, which probably doesn't surprise you. But what we didn't see coming is distribution, manufacturing, and food went off the hook. So 2019 was our busiest year ever. 2020, we slump into the pandemic. It slows down for a couple months, and then we're at full tilt again. We worked 24 companies in 19, our record-breaking year. We worked 26 companies in 20, but total different market. It was all manufacturing, all food, all distribution. What's happening today is that you're going to see office slowly return once they figure out what the heck they need and how they're going to do it. It'll be very interesting to see how offices and everything else are put together, as you know. The other thing that we have to watch, and I think the threat is now people can sit local and work global. And so companies that are here that are going to try to do things as traditionally as they used to might find that their competition is not the person next to them in Boise, but could be in Des Moines or San Jose or somewhere else. So this is going to be something we're going to watch very carefully is, are our local companies reacting to the new needs and desires of employees that live here? Because they don't have to anymore find a job here. They can find that job nationally or globally. So that's going to shift. Probably will shift how you guys go to market and what people need from homes. Let's go back to that. So this is our wins for the last 5 years, 12% customer support. That's kind of dried up. We don't see call centers anymore or a lot of customer support work. Back office shared services, so that's like Paylocity, so headquarter type jobs coming into the market. Manufacturing has been 24%, distribution has been 12%. I have to say, one of the weird things that happen is we typically, logistically, we're not a good place for distribution. I mean, you've tried to drive out of here before, right? Everybody who's left Boise. There's not a lot in between here and other places, and so we would typically lose those projects to other distribution points. But during that pandemic, how people are going to market with distribution has completely shifted and changed. I think a lot of things have been reshored. So we're seeing a really shift, and I think part of it was Amazon coming into town. I am sure people follow Amazon, realize they've done all the brilliant, analysis of can you distribute out of Boise, and once that happens, suddenly we're seeing distribution centers and people showing up saying, I can make things here and distribute out of here. So it'll be interesting to see how that shifts. Accolades have not slowed down, as you all know. I mean, it just every day you wake up and we're in something. Now, the new thing obviously has been in your business where USA Today and other people are coming in and saying, oh my God, everybody's growing. Where are they moving? They're all moving to Boise. And some of that's true. Did you guys see the USA Today? Was it USA or was it Morning Show or something? There was one on the... Anyway, there's a super old guy and he just moved here with his wife, and 3 people called me and said, Clark, I didn't know you moved. And I thought... I'm not that old yet. Come on, man. So, this line, as you know, that red line basically is 50% of our population is on one side and 50% of the population is on the other side. It is, about 5 years ago, that line was on Eagle Road, and it is shifting towards Nampa and Caldwell and this side of town, which makes sense because it's easier to build and there's infrastructure. Population base hasn't changed much. Our behavior is basically the same. 75% of people who live in Nampa commute somewhere else to work. 79% of Meridian commute somewhere else to work. And Boise is 35%. Bigger city, more commerce in the downtown shifts that number. And also the university. This is great news. As you know, we have added Atlanta. Yay! No, that's really good news, you guys. Come on. What's that? Oh, okay. I thought somebody hated Atlanta or loved it, and I was going to give them the floor. Austin. We've added flights to Chicago. Everett, Washington's been added. Houston. Nashville. And New York City just started doing flights. Now, that's going to be a test market, so they may fly here for about 4 months and then decide to leave. But from what I understand is what's happening is business travelers are not back in the marketplace. They're still not traveling. But what's happening is people are recreating and now going out and trying to spend some of that money they saved during the pandemic. And so flights are kind of there's a lot of experimental flights out there. So we'll see how Nashville and some of these hold up once we go back to business travel and that type of thing. But Atlanta is huge for us because it opens up the world to us. It opens up the Northeast. It opens up the South. It's a huge thing for us to have gotten that flight. Sorry, I'm going to drift through some of these pretty quick. Here is our growth to date. So I'm going to jump down here. I know none of you can see me because I'm 4 feet tall, but if you look here, this is us, 24.9% growth since 2010. 7.5% is the other metros across the country, and 7.1% is for the rest of the country. So we're growing pretty fast. 14,000 people, give or take, in migration a year. That equates to about 40 people a day. So you tell me, you guys are getting them in houses, right away when they get here? How are we going to keep up? Well, as fast as we're growing, we've had about 2%, maybe 3% growth a year. Our annualized employment growth has been 3%. So we are more than keeping up with not only residents that are here, but also jobs and in-migration, keeping up with that as well. Any questions on that one? I think that's... So what happened in the pandemic? I just thought this was super interesting, and I'll go back to this number. You can see there's a flat line across, hopefully, and we're the only one above that line. So during the pandemic, all of these other competitors, and we compete a lot against these other cities, that's why they're on there, Salt Lake, Austin, Reno, Phoenix, Denver, the United States is in there. Everybody lost jobs during the pandemic. We actually gained jobs during the pandemic. So even during the toughest of times, the economy here continued to thrive. One of the things I would need to put in there as a side note is at the same time the pandemic hit, Amazon was hiring 3,000 people in our valley. So whether you like Amazon or not, it did keep probably some of our hospitality industry and some of our travel, our students and others employed in one of the toughest times we've ever had. I think that is something of note that's really important. PillPack is coming to town in Meridian. That is another Amazon-owned company. They'll be hiring about 800, and about 125 of those will be pharmacists, and the rest will be pharmacist techs. We don't have 600 pharmacist techs in the valley, but as somebody said earlier, this is one of those times where our community college and others are really getting together to gin that talent up. So people who have lost their jobs in certain areas have been misplaced. This would be a nice place to send them, and they will be compensated well. Area unemployment, we were below 3% before the pandemic hit, and you can tell we're the blue line, and we're starting to scale back to that. So we're at 3.3% unemployment, where the rest of the country is at about 6.1%, and I guarantee you that thing's going to be under 3% very quickly. So where's everybody moving from? I know that you guys get this question a lot and have to answer to your neighbors every day about what you do for a living. And I would tell you that 10 to 11 years, when I got here 10 years ago, that was 34% out of California. Now it's 46%. I know all your neighbors tell you it's 99% California, but it's really not. Washington and Oregon aren't on there, but that's because we have a lot of back and forth growth with both of those markets, so a lot of people moving to and from. I'd say Salt Lake's kind of the same thing. That's why it's low. It doesn't mean they're not moving here. It just means that some of them are going and some of them are coming from those markets. I would like to thank the breakfast sponsor. It was Alliance, by the way. When I got here, I'm good friends with Breanna from Alliance, and I was back there eating stuffing my face in the corner, and she said, "We were the breakfast sponsors." Out-of-state net migration by age. This is a really good number because look at how many young people are moving here. We're higher than the nation. We're at 28% are under the age of 20. So I know, again, your neighbors are telling you that 65 years and older, it's 99%. That's not true. It's actually much lower. We're lower than national average for 65 and older moving into our community. We have not become a retirement community. We are a healthy growth community that really represents, you will see a bit of an exit 20 to 34 years old, but then we go back up, and I believe that's, we get some boomerang effect where kids are going out and finding a career somewhere and then getting their way back here. I won't go over that with you. I love this slide, college grad retention rate. Boise Metro is 7th in the country for college grad retention rate. This is a little older number. I'll bet it's higher now. We lost the ability to get this number, but I love it so much that we are in the top 10 for retaining our students, and they stay here and they find jobs. And I think this should be a goal for us, is to get to number 1. I don't know if we'll ever get to number 1 because it's Houston. And if you've ever been to Houston, you know that once you graduate from college, you're not leaving because you're in a traffic jam. And I've used that joke, right, Breanna, before. You've heard that like 10 times, but I still love it. Cost of living, our office does the cost of living index. I am now, my nails come out on this one. When I got here, we were in the 80s. We were low 80% for cost of living. Guess what's brought it up? Housing and rents, right? It's gotten more difficult to say that we're the lowest cost. People aren't moving here because it's the lowest cost, so are they? And people aren't staying here because it's the lowest cost. They're staying here because it's the highest quality of life you can find across the country. I do not believe we are in a price tag community. And if we were, we never deserved that. We're still one of the lowest costs of doing business in the Pacific U.S., so that number holds up, and that's a good thing. Am I getting hooked and taken off stage? 5 minutes remaining. Okay. He's bigger than I am and younger. So 1 year median sales price, you guys know these numbers better than I do. We use COLI, and we are the ones who do the cost of living index. I'm gritting I don't know what that's going to be when the reports come back in. Breanna can probably tell you more accurately than I can, but that is getting harder and harder for people who live here to buy homes, and that sucks. And we've got to figure out a way to get around that. That's all I have. I have like 3.5 minutes left. Do you have any questions? Usually you do, but I did such a great job today that I can. Yes, sir.
How do you see the workforce coming back to help a lot of our local businesses get the staff? I mean, you can go to 3 restaurants a night, and 2 of them are closed because they don't have staff.
Yeah.
Did they all go to Amazon?
I don't think they all went to Amazon, but I think a lot of them decided that was their time to exit the hospitality industry. And I think it's going to be, this is one of our dilemmas, but it's McCall's dilemma, it's Haley's dilemma, it's almost any city that you want to live in is having this same issue. That doesn't make it any better for any of us, but I think it's really important for us not to localize national problems. And this is one of those. House prices are going up, there's a housing shortage, and employment right now, people can't find people. I do think it's a really great time for employers to start thinking about their employees better and start paying them what they're worth. The Mountain West has always had some of the lowest wages in the country, and I'm glad that that's getting recalibrated. Yes, sir.
One of the last times that we talked a lot about how secondary education and just in general having workforce here was impeding you guys bringing in some bigger fish. How has that changed with CWI? Has there been a lot of change in regards to that over the last couple of years? And where are we at now with just having workforce based on what these headquarters or secondary headquarters are wanting to see to bring their companies here?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. How does CWI and others affect us? First of all, I think CWI does an amazing job. They are an incredible partner of ours. Do they have enough resources? Do we give them enough resources? No. Are they the fastest growing community college in the country? Yes. I think they're doing a lot with a little there. The more support we can give them, we should be giving them that. And so I don't think we have education pipe problems here right now. Most companies that are coming here and are going to be hiring those 100 people are not looking at the unemployment base to hire. They will look at people that have jobs elsewhere and bring them up. So they're getting a job that's better than the one they've had, which is causing a problem in hospitality and other things. So, yes. Don't ever mention Twin Falls to me. Don't. No, I'm kidding. We lost Cliff Bar to them. That just broke my heart. I brought that site selector to this market. He'd never been here before, and he ended up going to Twin Falls. And Twin Falls won that deal, and it should be in Twin Falls. But one of the things we suffer from here, which will continue to be one of our biggest issues, is a lack of inventory in industrial property. So with what you do, the same pain you feel, we feel that same pain, but I don't get a commission, which sucks. But we don't have enough industrial property. It's gotten better. We do have some new developers coming in. We have new money coming in. And it looks like we've got some new industrial parks and that type of thing that will certainly keep us going. We have had a manufacturing win this year. We have another one that's coming that I can't talk about until they tell us we can talk about it. But I see that we have a shortage. We only have if they need a significant site in this valley, And I mean, this, 40 acres. We have about 3 places to take them. And if those 3 places don't fit, which likely they won't, or likely a lot of them won't fit there, we're out. Their job is to eliminate us from the site selection process, not keep us in. And so we will continue to struggle with industrial sites that make sense here. It's getting better, but there is a shortage. I hope that answers your question. Don't ever say Twin Falls to me again. Sorry. I'm still snarky, Breanna. I apologize. Any other questions? Sarah, anything? You're a sponsor of the Alliance. I got that. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Hey, thank you so much, Clark. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Clark, again, thank you for taking the time to be here today. And anytime we get to hear you speak about what's happening within your realm, it's just great because it impacts so much what we're doing. Next, I want to bring up Breanna Vanstrom. So I'm going to introduce her real quick. For those of you who do not know Breanna, she is our CEO at Boise Regional Realtors. She's going to be doing a mid-year housing update for 2021. And a quick introduction on her, if you don't know her background. She's been in the industry for 20 years in regards to all sides of the industry with marketing, association management, and also real estate. She's done event promotions and advertising work for the national brands like Rubbermaid, NASCAR, Disney on Ice, and Buffalo Wild Wings even. And she's actually been a realtor herself, which is one of my favorite things about Breanna. She always has that perspective that she's actually walked the walk alongside of us. And she's worked in communications for associations in West Palm Beach, Florida, St. Paul, Minnesota, which she is from Minnesota. And she's been with us, thankfully, since 2015 as our CEO and of BRR. So welcome, Breanna, to the stage.
Everybody. It's so nice to see everybody here today. I am going to jump right in. I've got a ton of slides to go through with you, but actually I have more that I actually am going to share with you today. So I will encourage you to jump on our website to get some additional information that we have for you. And really, Emily had kind of set it up well. Actually, all the speakers today have set up some of the stuff really well that I want to share with you. The purpose of what we do on this mid-year basis is to give you information to have those conversations with your clients, right? Because there's so much going on out there, especially in the national media about housing and real estate, and again, what all of you do. And we want to give you those tools to have those discussions with people and give you the context behind some of those numbers because, as we've been seeing for the past few years, we continue to have that insufficient supply of homes compared to demand. So that has not changed. Obviously, mortgage rates have allowed people to continue purchasing at the prices that they've been. And again, it's been talked about a lot, but how the pandemic has really made a lot of people rethink how they live and work and what do they want that to look like. It's so different, and again, you all know this, but having that conversation point about why it's different today than it was maybe in that previous peak, and our lending standards are different. The credit is not quite there in the way that it was before. And I get the calls all the time from the media saying, well, what's different right now? Why is this different? And we're certainly not going to say it's different this time, but we want to share is why it's different than what we saw before. And inventory rates and the lending piece is all about that. But you've probably also heard that we've been underbuilding for over a decade nationally. And so I wanted to kind of take a look at, well, what does that actually mean? When we kind of say that, why and how did they get to this number? And I actually took a little bit broader look in terms of what construction had looked like across the country. And going back to actually 1968, and I found these sort of two peaks in construction as we went back. Actually, more homes were built in 1973 than our more recent peak in 2006. And what was interesting when you looked at that and started thinking about some of the dynamics, it's really a factor of demographics and federal housing policy, which was so interesting to see because we've talked so much about millennials and they've been aging into home ownership over the past few years. But when we go back to the 70s, The baby boomers were moving through those traditional home ownership years for the first time, and at both of these peaks in our construction time, federal housing policy had changed to essentially expand access to credit for people, to allow people to have the money they need to buy homes. So actually the HUD, Housing and Urban Development Act, was done in 1968, and in addition to that, and Ginnie Mae was created from that as well. But from that, actually, they had federal funding to develop 1.7 million housing units at that time, which really pushed that construction. And what's interesting, and I should say on housing units in this case, it's single-family apartments, condos, townhomes, all those different products, right? But again, seeing those different factors that were going on these big federal policy levels as we have these big groups of people moving through, I think we're still going to see that for the next few years. Those of you who are well connected to NAR, you know the conversations that NAR is having with Congress, with the White House right now about trying to figure out what do we need to do around housing policy, financing, and all of these things to really help with that affordability thing, knowing we're in such a different space and knowing we have a lot of people still moving through those traditional home buyer years. I think in 2020, NAR found that the average first-time home buyer was still a Gen X. So we've got a lot of people still kind of coming through that market. But I think when we kind of look at this, right, we know not every single person owns a single housing unit, right, or lives in a single housing unit. So we want to take a look at the actual change in households. So at those household formations that changed during that time, sort of separate from the population growth, which we know we've had. Comparing that to the change in housing units. And we can see, and we know this and we can feel this, that those household formations have outpaced that growth in housing units, both on the national level, the state level, and here in Idaho as well, or Ada County as well. But what's interesting too is, again, talking about this whole thing of how this national sort of housing market is affecting us locally, Freddie Mac did some interesting research and found that 29 of the states, so majority of the states, are facing this housing deficit. And we know the pressure that puts on adjacent states, right? So the states in dark blue, Oregon, California, Texas, Colorado, the impact they're having on the Mountain West overall, we feel that, we know that it's also happening along the East Coast as well. And I think that some of the research that Freddie Mac did, they said, we still need about 2.7 million housing units to bring the market back into balance nationwide. Interestingly, to bring that a little bit closer to home, because that's not a helpful number for us, right? But HUD actually did some research, and they do this every couple of years to understand what's the actual market need in an area. So for the Boise Metropolitan Statistical Area, which this covers Ada, Canyon, Boise, Owyhee, and Gem counties, so that's kind of what this is looking at. They're still saying by the end of 2023, we need almost 20,000 new housing units brought into that area, right? And so what's interesting is they're forecasting a lot of that will obviously be brought into Ada County, Canyon County, and they really called out Meridian in particular, which was interesting to see. But that's through 2023, right? That's not all tomorrow, that's not all right away, and it's not all single-family homes. Again, this is looking at the need for all of those different type of density products that we need. And when we even kind of zoom out, and I was like, well, what do we actually have right now, right? What does our housing stock look like? And Emily kind of hit on this before earlier, is you need that mix of product. And Ada County in particular, our housing stock is mostly single family, about 85%. In comparison, Austin's about 50-50. So understanding sort of those dynamics that we even have on top of our current housing stock and what's being brought on top of that, we're going to continue to struggle with rising home prices in that case because, one, it's great to bring those new properties on board, but knowing that we're not getting those properties at those smaller densities, those smaller footprints, and those lower price points that they can bring on. But that's all kind of like on the high level, right? But we know that there's so many other factors going on. It's not just population, it's not just housing policy. There's lots of things happening just in people's lives. And I'm not going to read through all of these. You can take a look at these later. But Clark actually set me up really well for one of the points I think is interesting on here is I think one of the other reasons we've seen so much growth in our market in particular is it's just easier to get here now than ever. He highlighted some of the new flights that are coming in, but he's right. This isn't just a city you drive to for the weekend, right? You don't just like pop in, no, I'll just go to Boise for the weekend and drive over there, right? I think we're the most remote metro area in the lower 48 states. So that is certainly changing, and as it's easier for people to get here from a quick nonstop flight, it's making it more of a viable option for people than I think it ever was before. So, lots of different things on here that are adjusting that supply and demand, especially on the existing side. And the way we try to quantify that for you guys on a monthly basis is through our month's supply of inventory metric. So you've seen this chart before, you've seen these numbers, but to help you explain this to a consumer if they're like, well, I don't even know what this means, or for you if you're trying to just watch how the market may be shifting, we are always looking for that number to be between 4 to 6 months of supply. We have not seen that in quite a while, right? We all know that. But what's interesting is when we look at this, the blue line is for existing, and that's been very low, well below that balanced market for quite some time. We were in balance for new construction for a little while, weren't we? But when that more pressure came on that existing market, it pushed the demand to new construction, and then we just are all well aware of the delays, the difficulty it is to bring new product online right now, and so that's kind of bringing that month supply of inventory down there as well for Ada County, and we're less than a month supply in both segments right now. So again, we know what this means, but if a client's like, I don't understand this, it's essentially saying, because this number is as of June 30th, is as of July 1st, if no new homes were brought into the market, we would be out of homes to sell in less than a month, right? So that's one of the reasons that's leading to a very fast-paced, frantic market, as well as the days on market count. And so this is an interesting chart that I want to just kind of two thoughts on this. If you look at the lighter bars on the left side of that chart, so that's our average days on market, so time from active to pending, right? But the dark gray line is one we don't often talk about. That's sort of our pending to close, and that time frame has not really changed. And I think we're about 30 days on average, kind of over this span of time. And you all know that's where a lot of the work gets done, right? We can't get to closing until we do all of that work between pending and closing. And Emily made a perfect point. We don't talk about that to consumers, right? All they're kind of thinking about right now is to buy a house is that kind of, I just got to get a contract in. There's a lot of stuff that still happens after the fact, right, to get to that point and get to closing. So being sure you're talking about that entire process that people are going to go through, making it very clear, like, it's going to be fast right now, and if you're ready to buy, we're probably going to have to make some quick decisions, but also being prepared for some of the decision points and the timeline it's going to take after the fact to just prepare people, and then also explaining the value that you do along the way. But one other thing that I think is making it a little bit, the misperception of what's available in our market is the fact that days on market is now less than 30 days. Because the way that our reports work, right, we do a monthly snapshot, and inventory in particular is a snapshot of 1 day's inventory, whereas closed sales, right, is cumulative, right, so everything that kind of closed within that month. Because it's under that 30-day mark, we're probably not showing a lot of the homes that were available and already went into pending status, right? Because so if we just use this number, I think it's 7, less than, just right at a week is our average market time in Ada County. So if you list a home on July 1st, right, and it went pending July 7th, well, it's never going to show up in our inventory numbers, but it'll show up as a pending sale. So it's creating an even larger perception that we have lower inventory than that we actually have, right? It's selling fast. It's not sufficient based on demand, and that's why it's selling so fast. But hopefully when you see those numbers, also be looking at active inventory and pending. Did you get a sense of the market scope and what's available? I think that's a really helpful point for people right now. That's a market indicator we're going to be watching. I've got a ton more slides that I didn't have time to show you, but I had to make them. So they're in the PowerPoint. You can read them online. But these are the things we're going to be looking at and watching to see if we start to see some shifts in the market. And we've heard that, right, on a national level. Home prices are coming down. Buyers are backing away. We've started to see an uptick in inventory locally, which is great, which is what we want. We're certainly not like the suddenly swooped back into balance by any means, but these are the things we're going to be watching for, and as we see those things start to make meaningful, kind of consistent trends, we'll be reporting on those in our monthly analysis for you guys. But so watch on those. But then obviously mortgage rates, right? Those have been the things that have been allowing people to continue to purchase at these higher price points. And I made an eye chart slide, thanks to Ryan Fraley, wherever he is. He shared some great insights for me on the mortgage market and kind of what's going on. So take a look at those, and hopefully this is some helpful context, again, as you're having conversations with clients. And what I thought, actually what was most helpful for me to hear about his comments is, we did hear nationally, right? Like mortgage purchase applications are down, people are backing away. And he did say, yeah, it dipped here a little bit when vacations hit and schools ended and all of those things, but they're starting to come back. So that's also obviously a leading indicator to be watching for. So thanks, Ryan, for sharing all this great information. I won't read it line by line, but again, please check this out and those insights because this is obviously what's really driving our market. But one of the other things that we've been able to share over the last few years is good news, is saying, hey, rates are so low, it's allowing people to buy at these higher home prices and still have monthly rates or monthly payments that are still kind of the same as they were before, maybe even less. But that's not happening anymore. Our prices are rising so fast that the rates are not offsetting those anymore like they were even just last year. So for some, that $200-300 increase in a monthly mortgage payment may be still affordable, still may be manageable, but for some that does put that out of reach for them. And again, this is based on just looking at our median sales price year to date. 20% down payment, all of these different things, right? So there's many factors that are going to change the affordability option for somebody, but I think it's just helpful to kind of understand where we might be going in terms of prices. And certainly as we see some, percent of original list and all of those things, there's a point at which buyers' kind of willingness and maybe even more ability to continue to pay at these higher prices is going to be limited as prices continue to grow. And I think the other thing, though, that I've been kind of thinking about and hearing the discussion around, well, there's obviously all of these foreclosures that are coming out of the market pretty soon, right? Like, that's going to happen. And so I wanted to do a little bit of research into what people are saying around that, because there is a concern, right? People are taking on larger amounts of mortgage debt, even if that monthly payment is manageable still, right? But what I think is really interesting is, when we did run into this recession, which apparently was a 2-month recession, did we all hear this? The recession was over last year, so this is great. We're not in a recession anymore, apparently. But what had happened when we were moving through the pandemic, and there was a real concern about, are people going to be able to stay in their homes, that forbearance program kicked in, or forbearance programs kicked in from lenders that were not available when we kind of went through the Great Recession previously, right? So back then, people were just instantly put into a foreclosure situation, where now people have a little bit more runway. And I think that was really, really helpful to sort of avoid some of those. And not to say there will not be, distressed or foreclosed sales that may still come out of this for some people, but it's really nice to see some of those forbearance programs that were used are coming back, or people have plans to exit those. Also, foreclosure filings continue to be at their lowest levels across the country that they ever have been. And I think as of June, there were only 113 filings statewide for Idaho. And that's great, because if we remember where we were, I think this is what Clark said, this is when he moved here, right? The part of the bar that the 2010, 2011, we were at nearly 50% of all homes selling in some sort of distressed situation back then, and we do not want to go back to there. I think I shared this at one of the other summits this week, is, we hear from people sometimes like, well, it's just not fair. I wish prices were back where they were 10 years ago. And it's like, the reason prices were where they were 10 years ago is not what we wanted to be at. That was also a very unhealthy market. So that is something to really be mindful of. And when we hear, even if we do start seeing a little bit of an uptick in distressed activity, we're starting from these like historic lows, nationwide, statewide, and right now I think we're at 0.1%. And I think if I can read this chart from this far away, there was just 2 active listings that were in a distressed status in MLS when I looked last week. So the other side of this that people are kind of saying that even if we move into this, where they're seeing some positive signs, is people have more equity now than ever. We talked a little bit about cash sales already. People are buying homes with cash, a little bit higher, still not at the majority than ever before, which is allowing some people, at least in that segment, but just as homes have appreciated, the average equity that homeowners have experienced, Idaho is the #1 state in the country to have that equity appreciation year over year. So on average, our homeowners gain $71,000 in equity. So the other thought on that, right, it's really great for people. They've, seen that appreciation. If they do find themselves in a situation where they may have to sell and are considering a short sale, well, we shouldn't have as many short sales, right? We've got the equity built into these properties right now and the demand behind it to hopefully mitigate any of those things that may still come through. So that's the discussion on the national level. That's something that we'll keep watching. How do we talk to people about how to preserve their equity, be smart with their equity, be careful with their equity, so that we don't find people in those situations they were in before? I think some of the points Ryan shared was cash out refis are up, but what they're seeing is a lot of that is for remodel, reconstruction, staying in your home, which is probably keeping some existing inventory back from the market. But just again, that's a conversation point I think we should be having with people who are really concerned we're going back to what we had previously. Kind of at a county level, where people are moving from, and in part, that's part of what's kind of helping with our equity, is people are coming with a little bit more cash. Again, still not a majority of the market. But I always like to point this out. A lot of the in-migration stats we look at kind of skip over the moves that are happening within our county. So during this time frame, 58% of all the moves that happened in Ada County were within Ada County. So I think we forget about that sometimes when we just see people just constantly like moving in, and we just assume that's the market. But there still is a lot of in-county migration, if you will, that happens. And then you can kind of take a look at the other areas where people are moving to. I'm going to skip this one real quick and jump to our out-migration. What I thought was interesting this year when I looked at these numbers, and again, it's through 2018 is the most recent we have to get this real county-to-county level, is it looks like the top 6 counties are all within Idaho, 2 where Ada County residents are moving to. And about 2 years ago, I think I shared some research from the California Association of Realtors where they were finding something called this 2-step migration is what they were calling it, where people within California were first moving from the metro areas, higher priced areas, to more inland, more affordable markets in California before they then said, well, now it's too expensive here, I don't want to move here, and then they would move elsewhere, right? I think we're starting to see that here as well in Ada County, where we're seeing people to start to say, okay, I'm going to move to Canyon, I'm going to move to Bonneville, Bannock, Twin Falls County, and kind of making that migration itself. So that was kind of an interesting new finding that we saw in the numbers this year versus previous years. But one thing, I'm going to do a little plug for something new that we're trying to do. We are trying to get you more current and more detailed information on this kind of in-migration, the demographics, why people are moving here. So if you see an email from us on a monthly basis asking you to share a little bit of information about sales that you've had, please fill that out. This is not statistically relevant by yet, but this is what we had so far. But what we want to try to do is give you that real-time information to help you consider where are these referral markets. I mean, you guys kind of know individually, but if we can bring that market intelligence to you, we'd really love to do that. So if you see this, please make sure you're sharing that with us. So we can get you some new data, because like I said, this will be really cool, but you just have to help us do it, right? If we can get it together. All right, so kind of the third main point and the last piece I want to touch on is, again, the impact of the pandemic. We've talked about it already quite a bit, right? But I think it's important to remember where we all were last year. I was doing this virtually last year from a soundstage in Meridian somewhere, right? And sharing some of this stuff with you, but we still were not sure how we were going to come out of this. And there was a lot of fear and uncertainty, and we had just been through a couple months and a lot of phone calls of figuring out, could we even continue to still do real estate here? And you know it was bad if we let Michelle Bailey have access to our Facebook page so she could do Facebook Live videos to you guys as our president last year to make sure we got this information out to all of you, because there was so many questions about what's happening right now, what do people need to know? And it was just a lot of uncertainty, right? But your national, your state, and your local associations, really our role last year was to help guide you and have those conversations with consumers and for your own businesses. And the other big part of that, right, is because we just didn't know. My presentation last year, I had a slide that said economists are debating whether we're going to do a V or a W-shaped recovery. Well, we had neither. So again, this is why you don't listen to any of this stuff. You just take it and kind of work your way with it, right? We're actually experiencing what's called a K-shaped recovery. And I think that's why this sort of recovery is so confusing for a lot of people, because we've got people who are doing very well coming out of this, people who were able to work from home, who were in industries that weren't as affected, and we had people in industries or who were already in some personal circumstances that were really difficult, who are still struggling. And I think that's what makes some of these policy discussions and some of the issues around people doing really well in housing where other people are really struggling very difficult for the communities, but I think for our industry in particular, because we sit at these intersections of it's really great and we want people to buy homes and build wealth through home ownership, but we know that that does leave some people out. So what do we do to help on the other side of that with affordability? So I think it's really difficult. There's going to be a lot of still uncertainty, some changes, and some policy work that's going to come out of this to see how do we make our way through with some concerns that this will continue and most likely will exacerbate some home ownership and wealth inequality as we come out. And I will just say one last plug. You guys, again, you know your clients, you know your customers, you know people in the community. If anybody is still facing financial hardship or has questions, there are resources here. And we've had conversations in particular with Idaho Housing and Finance, with the Boise City, Ada County Housing Authority, and even some of our nonprofit providers about, they have money to give. That, we hear a lot about rental assistance, mortgage down payment assistance from COVID. They have money. They would like to give it out. And so if you hear of anybody in those situations, especially for homeowners, but if you have property owners who have tenants who are struggling, get them connected to these programs so that we don't find some distressed properties trickling in or people kind of finding themselves in difficult situations. And some other resources that we wanted to share with you to talk to people about credit and working on managing equity. Because all that said, there's a lot that's been happening, right? It's moved very quickly. I mean, we see all these things that Boise's been the fastest in appreciation for both rent and home prices since the beginning of the pandemic. And I thought this was a great summary. The chief economist from Redfin put this together that just really succinctly talked about why we've kind of done all of this kind of changes and movements over the last few years and how, again, rates and different things have impacted that. And while we're seeing a lot of that impact still in housing, and we're starting to hear, as I mentioned before, prices may be regulating a little bit on the national level. We haven't quite seen that here yet. But as those prices regulate, you're going to see pressure being put back on the rental market, which is why we have just that need for rentals locally and across the country as well. I won't go through this, but it just shows you, for reference, the average mortgage rent versus, or mortgage payment versus average monthly rent on those different bedroom count sizes, just to get a sense of sort of what we're experiencing here locally. But another thing, too, that I think has been interesting for our market that we've experienced is the uptick in off-market activity, especially from the pandemic. So if we look at 2020, and just to put this into context, all of the other the dark blue lines are annual, and then obviously light blue line is just year-to-date. But what we consider an off-market, just as how we calculate this, is a 0 days on market property or something that goes into IMLS as an unpublished sold. And so I think in 2020, we obviously saw a lot of that pick up because what did we ask you guys to do? Go virtual, do tours, do kind of, people were saying, I don't want people through my homes right now. But so that we could get properties moving, how do we pivot and do some of those things online for people? So we did see a lot more people saying, I'm not ready to move right now, or I need to find my next house before I even list, but if you know of somebody in the meantime, let me know. Well, how many of you have a buyer right now that you can't find a listing for, right? You all know somebody that's looking for a listing. So we saw a lot of properties and a lot of transactions get put together within brokerages before they even hit the MLS, and then we would see them get brought onto the market. We're seeing that continue. I do think that 9%, that nearly 10% is going to come down. We're just still halfway through the year. But that is a change in our market that we've been seeing increase. And also, just as a thought on that, it's also impacting our days on market count, right? Because if we have 10% of our sales with 0 days on market, that's going to bring that number down quite a bit as well. So I think that's also having an impact on the perception of the market as well. So being thoughtful around that. And what was interesting, we had been kind of researching this a while ago, and then I think there was an MLS in Washington, D.C. that put out a number that said homes that are listed in the MLS sell for more than those that sell off market. And it was very funny because everybody's like, well, of course you would say that. You're an MLS. You're going to say, like, use our service, make sure it's on there. But being aware that when we do put those properties in the MLS, it has the widest audience, the widest possible buyers that can come to it to bring more offers, right, to somebody. So obviously there are reasons why there may be a seller that says, I need to do this, and we have rules, we have code of ethics around how to manage off-market sales, but understand that there is a potential financial impact for sellers when they do this, because we are finding here locally as well that homes selling off-market are selling a little bit lower. Still over list price, right? Still a majority over list price, but a little bit lower than those that are selling on market, if you will. So be really thoughtful around that as you're having conversations with clients about using that tactic. And then one more eye chart from you, but what this is put together was, this is all the questions we've got over the last year plus of, how do I serve my clients today? How do I talk about some of these things? Big issues from, buyer love letters to, off markets and all of these different things that are going on and that we've really seen change over the last year or so. So I want to just give you again, read this at your own time, but it was just all of these different things that we've been talking to members about, and I want to just kind of put those together to share that with you because we don't see the market drastically changing, at least in the near term over the next few months, because as long as we continue to see this insufficient supply of demand or insufficient supply of homes compared to demand, we are going to see our prices continue to rise. And you can see over the last few months, we have seen that little bit of an uptick in inventory. And again, take inventory with a grain of salt based on everything I just told you with what we were looking at. But we will still see that. So for us, when we talk about we need more supply, we're talking existing inventory. We want to see those existing listings coming onto the market, but we also need new construction, right? But for us, we're certainly mindful that growth has some real impacts on the community. So for us, we don't just put them everywhere. Not everywhere, just go ahead and build homes. We are really committed to all of the things we talked about today. Our public policy positions are there. We want you all to be engaged and involved with these conversations that we're having. And anything we can do to help you get engaged on a personal level, if you have clients or neighbors who want to get involved, there's some really cool resources out there. Particularly around homeownership matters. NAR is helping to put together something called the American Property Owners Alliance. Really great resources for those people who want to be involved in these policy conversations and help drive some of the big decisions that we have in the market. And with that, we'll keep talking about this every month, right? Talking about what's going on in our market, giving you guys the information, whether it's just these snapshots that you can share on social and put your own context around, to some kind of one-pagers that you can pop into your CMAs and your listing presentations, or to that monthly analysis that will probably continue to say we have an insufficient supply of homes compared to demand, right? That's going to be our narrative for quite a while. So hopefully this was helpful for you. I know we're running pretty short on time, so I'm going to wrap it up here, but I'll hang around for questions afterwards. And just thank you guys so much for being here with us today, and I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
so much. There's probably people in the room that come just to hear your portion. So thank you so much. Just remember that all information, all the slides, if you're taking photos, I do that sometimes, but it will all be on BoiRealtors.com, so you can check out all the information there and all of Breanna's slides. Again, thank you to Clark, Lori, Margaret, Emily, and also Breanna for taking the time to be here today with us. And I know we're kind of over on time, so I'll just wrap up real quick and say that as your president, I just kind of want to challenge you. First of all, thank you for taking the time to be here today. It means the world to have you guys in our space, in our room, and just engaging with us again. And I just want to kind of leave a challenge to stay connected. Stay connected with your elected officials as we move forward. Stay connected in regards to what's happening at the local level. The old adage is so true that if your profession is real estate, which it obviously is because you're in your room, then community involvement, advocacy work, and politics is your business. So thank you for that. Stay connected with your consumers, and please leverage your membership with BRR, whether it's connecting with them and through our nonprofit arm, where you can give your money to be matched in regards to charitable contributions, whether it's the amazing stats and information that BRR puts out. Stay connected with your consumer. And then maybe more importantly, as we transition out of the pandemic, is to stay connected with one another. I can't tell you that how much I truly believe now I am a better realtor for being around all you fine people. Our industry is, we're pretty lucky here in the Treasure Valley. We have some amazing, strong leadership, whether that's realtors, lenders, title companies, and to be engaged with one another, we're better for it. So thank you again for taking the time to do that. And last but not least, again, thank you to our sponsors today for everything, especially Alliance Title for breakfast. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you guys soon. Thanks.